Good afternoon and welcome everyone to the RenovoRx Fireside Chat. My name is Valter Pinto, I'm Managing Director at KCSA Strategic Communications, and I'll be your moderator today. I'm joined today by Shaun, CEO, and Dr. Gregory Tiesi, Medical Director at Hackensack Meridian, Jersey Shore University Medical Center, one of the initial customers of the company's novel FDA-cleared RenovoCath drug delivery device. We're looking forward to hearing an update today from Shaun on Renovo's commercialization strategy, as well as the company's ongoing phase 3 trial in locally advanced pancreatic cancer. Today, we'll also hear insights from Dr. Tiesi based on his work and experience in the field with RenovoCath and his firsthand experience on its impact on patient care at Hackensack. Before we begin, I'll quickly like to remind everyone that statements made during today's conference call, including in the slide presentation, may be deemed forward-looking statements within the meaning of the Safe Harbor of the Private Securities Litigation Reform Act of 1995 and applicable federal securities laws, and that actual results may differ materially from what is contemplated by such forward-looking statements due to a variety of risks, uncertainties, and other factors. In particular, forward-looking statements may include those related to Renovo's commercialization plans for RenovoCath and prospects for future revenue growth, as well as statements regarding the timing in the future of full enrollment and interim and final data from the company's phase 3 trial. Additionally, Dr. Tiesi's expressed comments today are his opinion based on his experience and not the opinion of Hackensack Meridian Jersey Shore University Medical Center. For a detailed discussion of some of the ongoing risks and uncertainties facing Renovo, I refer you to the company's annual report, which was filed with the SEC earlier this week, as well as the company's investor presentation and other reports filed periodically with the SEC. The company disclaims any intention or obligation to update or revise any forward-looking statements, whether as a result of new information, future events, or otherwise, unless otherwise required by law. And with that out of the way, I really want to thank everyone for joining our call today. At the conclusion of our fireside chat, we'll have a live Q&A. Please submit your questions via the Q&A function at any time. We'll do our best to get to your questions within the time frame allotted. If for some reason we don't get to your question, please email our team at RenovoRx@kcsa.com. This call is being recorded today, Thursday, April 3rd, 2025. The recording will be available on the company's investor relations website under the events section at the conclusion of this call. Before we get into the Q&A portion, I want to give Shaun an opportunity to discuss Renovo's commercialization efforts for RenovoCath and the continued progress of the ongoing phase 3 TIGeR-PaC clinical trial. Shaun, over to you.
Well, thank you much for the introduction, Valter, and I appreciate KCSA for giving the opportunity and Dr. Tiesi for taking time out of his busy practice to join us here. So I'll just do a quick high-level overview, and then we can launch into questions and answers. Let me start by sharing my screen here. Well, thank you again for joining. So as many of you know, we're a company that's focused on treating cancer very differently than most companies. As we look at new therapies for cancer patients, it's generally a matter of the balance of trying to tackle the tumor without destroying the patient. And unfortunately, in the world we have in drugs, it's a lot of times a very tight balance between the two. What we've developed is a new mechanism to actually get more drug in the tumor and less side effects for the patients. And I'd love to show you the opportunity we have, the advancements we've made both in the clinical trial and then the more recent announcement of the commercial efforts. So very high level, the combination therapy we're developing has orphan drug designation. Our lead product candidate is RenovoCath plus gemcitabine. RenovoCath is our proprietary device. Gemcitabine is a very well-profiled drug that's used to treat many cancers, including pancreatic cancer. We recently announced the commercialization of our standalone device with first purchase orders in 2024. And we look for strong demand currently with organic growth. It's really scaling our operations and commercial opportunities here in this calendar year. On the parallel pathway of a commercial device, we also have potential upside in our phase 3 TIGeR-PaC study, which is for the treatment of locally advanced pancreatic cancer. We've already published or presented data that shows in our interim analysis an increase in overall survival and a decrease in toxicities or side effects. Looking at the commercial opportunity in front of us, we're pursuing a $400 million potential peak U.S. revenue with the RenovoCath by itself, with our first revenue realized late last year, and we expect to grow our revenue substantially over the next few quarters. From a team perspective, we've got a very experienced team, both on the commercial and clinical side, and also both on the pharma and device side to help us get to where we need to go. So just to step back and talk about the science for a second on how this technology works and why it's different. Generally, when we think of chemotherapy, it's systemic chemotherapy. It blasts the whole body in therapy, and very little gets to the tumor. Our RenovoCath device is inserted through a small incision and into an artery in the leg, and under X-ray guidance, a physician places the catheter adjacent to a tumor that doesn't normally have large blood vessels that feed the tumor, so drugs won't really get there. The mechanism of our device is to blow up the two balloons, and then we give a whole volume and concentration of gemcitabine or chemotherapy or drug through the catheter in that small space over 20 minutes. And what that does, it drives a pressure head that forces the chemotherapy through the wall of the blood vessel. And the resulting factor is we have a high concentration of drug that saturates the tumor. If you can imagine, without this type of device, generally the chemotherapy or drug just courses through the veins and the arteries in the body, and very little actually gets to the tumor. The whole crux of our technology is this new proprietary mechanism we call trans-arterial micro-perfusion, or TAMP, to force drug in the vessel through the vessel wall and bathe the tumor in chemotherapy. This results in about 100 times increase in drug concentration at the tissue site than you'd expect to give systemic delivery, which makes sense and why we're probably seeing a higher potential survival for these patients and much less side effects. From a market standpoint, looking at the commercial opportunity in front of us, as I mentioned, the FDA has cleared our device several years ago. Due to physician demand and early initial positive data, physicians have been requesting, can we please buy your catheter because nothing works in pancreatic cancer and other tumors like pancreatic cancer. If you look at the market potential here, there are a couple other catheters that are using the same existing reimbursement coding that we're using, and they're charging about $6,000 to $8,500 per device. In our clinical trial history, we see about 5 to 8 treatments per patient. And if you look at a 7,000 patient annual US market of where we believe we'll get peak revenue, this equals about $400 million in annual sales in the US alone. From a patent perspective, we have this well patented with 8 patents issued in the US, one and then another 10 actually outside the US. This includes the device itself and also the mechanism of action as we've invented, developed, and also patented this whole idea of this trans-arterial micro-perfusion. From a go-to-market standpoint, it doesn't require a large capital resource to really tackle the bulk of this market. Looking at these types of solid tumors, if you use pancreatic cancer as an example, most of the patients who don't have the tumor spread or metastases are concentrated in very high volume institutions. There are about 200 hospitals in the US that treat the bulk of non-metastatic pancreatic cancer, for example. And in this, with a small sales force of, let's say, 3 to 5 people, we can tackle the majority of this market. So unlike other commodity devices or therapies in crowded spaces, with a small dedicated sales force, we can tackle the bulk of this market and get to very high revenues. Currently, we have 16 actively enrolling centers in our TIGeR-PaC phase 3 trial. These are sites right now that will turn into customers and will most likely adopt the technology at the conclusion of enrollment this calendar year, as they've already been trained on the device, they're already purchasing the device, and they already have referral pathways in place. Also, as I mentioned, we have new purchase orders starting late last year, and we're building up our sales channel with several high-volume NCI designated cancer centers and large community centers as well. So we've already really started to crack the initial surface of this opportunity with a very small team. To touch on the data, so far the most robust data we have this is in pancreatic cancer. This is a non-metastatic or locally advanced pancreatic cancer. Generally, when you see a new therapy for pancreatic cancer, you're expecting several weeks of survival, maybe up to 6 to 8 weeks. What we saw in the first interim analysis, and this is not final analysis, this is a 30% look at our currently ongoing phase 3 trial, is a 6-month separation in survival. We saw patients with our TAMP treatment living 6 months beyond the control arm, which is standard of care systemic dual agent gemcitabine plus Abraxane. This is about what we expect. We expect about 14 to 18 months for locally advanced pancreatic cancer. And here we're pushing about 2 years almost with our therapy versus the current standard of care. And what's amazing about this therapy, it's not just survival, but it's also the toxicity profile. As I mentioned, generally you're seeing patients have much higher toxicities as unfortunately, I think all of us have been touched with cancer in our families and friends. The chemotherapy side effects are debilitating. In our case, we're actually not seeing longer life with more side effects. We're actually seeing longer life with a 65% reduction in side effects. So we're really doing well by the patients who are actually living more normal lives than they would have under other therapies and standard of care therapies. So there's a big push and desire for the therapy, even given that our data set's early, we haven't hit a p-value yet, but it looks like there's a high chance of success that this is actually causing extension of life. And we've also seen the patients are feeling much better. So just to wrap up and summarize, we did report out initial revenues of $43,000 in Q1, or from Q4, Q4 2024 through the sales of RenovoCath on a standalone basis. For 2025, we have given guidance, so we expect this to increase to the low six-figure range for Q1 of 2025, followed by a sequential quarter-over-quarter growth. The total available market is about $400 million with the U.S. sales opportunity in areas where we've had experience with the device and we've got initial demand. From a cash position, as many of you know, we just raised a $12.1 million straight common, no warrant round back in February. In addition to the $7.2 million that we had exiting 2024, this puts us in an excellent cash position to get through the clinical trial and into deeper commercial penetration. From a shares outstanding standpoint, we've got about 36 million shares outstanding to date. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Shaun. I really appreciate that. We'll shortly open up the call today for Q&A. I already see several questions in the queue, but before we get to our audience questions, I do have just a few questions. And Shaun, you alluded to this in the concluding slide that you just showed. We just reported our 2024 year-end financial results. Obviously, the fourth quarter marked a significant milestone. You generated first revenue from sales of RenovoCath in December. And this was shortly after you announced the commercialization initiative. What are your expectations for RenovoCath from a revenue perspective going forward?
Well, thanks for the question, Valter. Yeah, we actually planned on commercializing this quarter. So we're gearing up towards the second half of last year to generate sales in Q1. We did post some revenue in December in Q4 of 2024 based on demand. And what's really been interesting, the last calendar year was really spent talking to physicians on answering calls saying they want to provide this device to patients, surveying physicians on is there a market here they'd be interested in. And that's really kind of organic internal demand, asking to be able to treat their patients. That gave us initial revenues in late 2024. And as I mentioned, low hundreds of thousands for this initial Q1. And we've got built on purchase orders upon purchase orders and new hospitals coming on board. There is a sales cycle to get this in the door at hospitals, and those are going through the process. I think I mentioned we have over 10 institutions exiting last year that are in the sales acquisition process.
Thanks, Shaun. And further to that point, I think investors' concern, question always during any commercialization period like we're in is the need for additional resources and infrastructure and how this relates to operating expenses ramping obviously as you go to market. What are your thoughts on OpEx required to execute on the commercial strategy you have?
Yeah, actually, I appreciate the question, Valter. The beauty is here is we've been operating, as many know, a very lean organization since the inception of the company. As far as the sales, it's expensive to hire a large sales force. And we've got the benefit of really three things. One is we've got this kind of organic internal demand where we've actually accomplished initial revenues without any sales reps. We've got 0 salespeople on our force right now. We are starting to grow organically. Really, it's been myself and my head of strategy out there. We are looking to hire a couple of sales reps in the not too distant future. And given the way the market is, we have a lot of optionality in terms of a small sales force of 3 to 5 people to really get to deep initial revenues. And/or I did publicly state that we're talking to a couple of strategic partners that have very established distribution channels with relationships with physicians and referral centers to partner with them to possibly build it out from there. So we've got optionality as we go into this calendar year to get to meaningful revenues. And from a burn perspective, we reported out $750 a month burn was last year. We see a small increase in that, but it's not going to be a material capital expenditure increase to be able to really drive meaningful revenues going forward.
Great. Thanks, Shaun. And now for Dr. Tiesi, again, I really appreciate your time and joining us today. As a physician whose medical center is actively using RenovoCath, really curious to share your insights on the TAMP therapy platform and its impact on patient care from your point of view.
Sure. You're able to hear me okay? Great. So, first off, we're very, sort of proud and thrilled to be the first institution in the state of New Jersey to offer this therapy. We've actually already received referrals from patients outside of our health system, which speaks to the interest in this device. But, um, just focusing on pancreas cancer, it is a very frustrating disease to treat. We are getting to the point where we're picking the disease up earlier and survival is improving, but we still suffer from the same issues, which are that the drugs that we give, although they are getting better, have serious issues with toxicity being one of the main issues. So you can only give the drug so many times, and the patients start to suffer, and also the efficacy goes down. So partly because you often have to reduce the dosing, people have to stop it for a while, and they just can't get through it. And then furthermore, the other issue is that the concentrations of the drug that actually make it into the cancer itself are markedly lower than we would like. I think there's sort of a thought that, oh, you give the drug in a vein and it just gets to the tumor. And unfortunately, that's not really the case. Specifically, pancreas cancer has, its own defense mechanism that truly prevents drugs given in a vein making it to the cancer itself. So being able to offer, we use gemcitabine, which is the one that's been studied, but this is a sort of a drug or treatment agnostic, um, platform. So you could give many different types of drugs. So as innovations come along, you can incorporate them into this. And the point here is that you can give the drugs, multiple times, and the patients don't suffer from the toxicity. So they can, continue to keep going through their therapies, and have local effects and not be limited by how their body can handle it. And we have lots of patients now who sort of are out of options. They've gone through all the chemotherapy, they've gone through the radiation. They're in your office, they don't have disease elsewhere in their body because the drugs are good enough to control that aspect of it. And they want further treatment. They want to continue to fight. And, truth be told, we really didn't have much options for them. We kind of just said, we're really sorry. You can try take this pill and it probably isn't going to do much, but at least we're trying something. And so that's where, the obvious enthusiasm about this platform is. And I will say there has been sort of a paradigm shift recently in the treatment of cancers over the last decade where we are going back to local therapies. There are other no, they don't do the same thing as this catheter, but we are moving towards, again, local therapies, infusing organs directly, because we've seen that although chemotherapy and immunotherapy and all these other treatments have gotten much better, they have plateaued. And we have a bunch of patients now who we're left with, they can't get more drugs in their veins because they can't tolerate it or it's just not working anymore. What can we do for them?
Thank you, and I think you said it well. It's Renovo truly has a platform technology, and I'm curious from your point of view, what other agents do you envision Renovo's technology being useful for to deliver?
I mean, I could say anything and everything, right? So as, immunotherapy and targeted therapies, there's no reason that you can't use any of these newer treatments, right? Like people do the legwork and they come up with the new drug. And I think this includes gene editing therapies like CRISPR. Some of you may have heard about that. Those treatments, specifically gene editing to treat cancer, is not available, and who knows when it will be for treatment of the whole body. Because gene editing sounds great, but you can't just give it in a vein and target it towards a cancer. It doesn't really work that way. We don't have a mechanism to do that. However, if you can direct it to the cancer itself, then you can edit the cancer cells and get the effect that you want. And once again, as new drugs come down the line, you can put them in this catheter, assuming that you've proven that it's safe, which it should be. If you're giving it in a vein and it's safe, then there's no reason to assume that it would be unsafe if you give it directly to the tumor and just increase the concentrations in the cancer itself.
Thank you. That's very helpful. I appreciate it, Dr. TC. And Shaun, back to you. If we could just think about the phase 3 trial. Can you give an update to our audience on where we're at in the trial with what you can publicly disclose?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Walter. So currently the plan and the goal is to complete enrollment this year, which is the impetus also about commercializing the device in parallel, that we wouldn't jeopardize enrollment in the trial. We've recently announced 3 major cancer centers coming on board to help with enrollment, this final push. University of Nebraska, Sarah Cannon in Nashville, Tennessee, and also Northwell, which is a massive center in the New York area. They've all 3 joined the study. So we anticipate completion of enrollment this calendar year. And then it's our final data, and we have an upcoming interim analysis as well.
Yeah, and on the interim analysis, Shaun, we just remind everyone what are the steps and timeline to publicly disclose that data, given that you expect to finalize enrollment and data at some point this year.
Yeah, it's okay. So just as a reminder, that the whole trial is aiming to randomize 114 patients. The final analysis will come upon the 86th event. As a survival study, these events are deaths. So we publicly disclosed that as of March 28th, as far as our progress goes, we've randomized 90 patients to date in the study. We've had 50 events or deaths to date. The second interim analysis will occur upon the 52nd event. So we're anticipating that 52nd event should be discovered sometime in Q2, and then it usually takes a few months to get the data cleaned and then to the data monitoring committee, and then that process we're guiding towards second half of 2025, so kind of mid-year plus, and then it gets reviewed by the TIGeR-PaC and the monitoring committee, and then they decide from there on how to treat the rest of the trial and how to continue.
Thanks, Shaun. And we have the first interim, we're expecting second interim, and obviously an outcome to the trial eventually. From your point of view, I mean, on the commercial side, how does the outcome of the trial, assuming that it's positive, how does it affect RenovoCath sales?
It's actually very interesting how what we've learned in really our reach out in 2024 on is there a market opportunity for the device alone before we complete a massive clinical trial. And given exactly what Dr. Tiesi described, is this patient population is very difficult to treat. The toxicities are major, and we see really, three potential wins on a standalone device commercial effort where we sit today. Even if all things being equal, if survival had no difference, so if our survival in our treatment arm was exactly the same as a control arm, we did not show survival benefit at all. There is a benefit that we're saying we're not doing worse by the patients, but if they can live higher quality lives and have less toxicities, then this is still a viable commercial product, and that could really help patients if we had equivocal data. So I'd say that's the downside, worst case scenario protection. And then beyond that, if let's say we get a numerical benefit, but we don't hit a p-value, so we don't show significance, but we show that patients look like they're surviving months longer, that would also cause deep market adoption. And of course, what we're expecting in the hope and the big win is we have a successful readout, we have a positive, successful p-value at the conclusion of the study, and then this could be widely adopted as a standard of care. So really, I believe the data we have right now with the first interim analysis, as much as it's early, it shows a lot of promise in a world where nothing else helps these patients, and the side effects are great. It's enough data to drive early market adoption today. And then as we get more data down the road, in each of those 3 scenarios, there's still a big market to be had here on the commercial side, and a great help for these patients as well.
That's great, Shaun. I really appreciate that, and Dr. Tiesi obviously as well. We've received a lot of questions, which is great, and we have a big audience today. Let me get to some of our questions. We have about 5-10 minutes left for our chat today. First that comes in, Shaun, is current reimbursement. What is the current reimbursement code for RenovoCath today?
Thank you for the question. So one of the drivers behind this decide to commercialize where we sit today is that last year in early 2024, CMS changed the reimbursement for these types of procedures. Previously, the hospitals are reimbursed about $10,000 per procedure. We do about 5 to 8 procedures per patient. Given the nature of our device being more of a specialty device, it's a specialty procedure. It's the distinguishing factor is called pressure-mediated delivery. So we're using pressure to get this trans-arterial micro-perfusion approach. And there's a new code that got put in place last year to cover these more expensive specialty products to drive pressure to force drug into tissue. That code went from $10,000 to $17,000 per procedure. So the delta of $7,000 allows companies like us to charge in that $7,000 to $9,000 range per device, making this a lucrative potential business opportunity. Instead of waiting for drug device combination approval where we charge kind of therapeutic level prices, we're able to achieve therapeutic level pricing with the current reimbursement coding.
Great. And here's an interesting question. We've obviously started generating revenue, and we have more orders to come. What does a typical order size look like when institution orders? How many do they typically order, and what's the reorder pace? Any color you can share with that?
Yeah, generally it's a stocking order of 3 to 5 catheters up front to put it on the shelf. And then these patients generally get treated, excuse me, every 2 weeks, and then they usually reorder as they use them. So as they start getting more patients in, we see catheter reorders on almost a biweekly basis as they get treated. And then when they have additional patients, then it's more frequent. So it's generally, again, 3 to 5 up front, and then we see weekly or biweekly orders from the hospitals that are involved.
Thanks. And I'm not sure if we can disclose, but how many actual hospitals and treatment centers have we sold into to date?
We haven't disclosed that publicly, but we did disclose publicly over 10 are in the purchasing process. I alluded to this earlier, but the purchasing process involves getting multi-specialties involved that will be interested in treating patients, and then going through hospital administration to allow them to become a qualified vendor and get the catheter on the shelf. And then the big part of it is looking at the finances. They look at the reimbursement coding, what we're charging, seeing that the hospital is still profitable, and then they bring it in. That process can take for anywhere from a month up to 6 months. We initiated that in the second half of last year, resulting in over 10 kind of checking the boxes on, yes, we want to move forward with this, and then we're getting through the process. So we haven't announced exactly how many have gotten through and are ordering catheters, but it's several, and these include large volume academic centers, community hospitals, and also NCI designated cancer centers. So looking forward to sharing more details as that comes out.
Yeah, and to that point, Shaun, I think that's a fair response, and we are going to be reporting our Q1 results in by mid-May. So we'll obviously have more information here in the next 45 days as it becomes available. Supply issues, obviously, this morning's news around tariffs is what everybody's talking about. Where's the catheter made? Are there any supply issues that you feel will affect our commercialization strategy?
Yeah, it's a very interesting time to be where we are in a commercial sense. We're in a very good position. Our devices are actually manufactured in Illinois, outside of Chicago. The components are all coming from in the U.S. as well. So we're very fortunate to not having gone overseas years ago, and we have a kind of more of a local supply chain. We did announce last year a deeper partnership with our contract manufacturer, in which we provided warrants really akin to stock options to incentivize the management there to be able to scale. So we began scaling last year. We've got a very strong supply and a cadence of supply coming out to support the demand this year and grow exponentially thereafter. So fortunately for us, we're not widely affected by the issues we're seeing globally right now with other supply chain issues.
Okay, great. And Dr. Tiesi, I have a question for you, if I may. The learning curve to using the catheter, from your experience, how is the usage of our catheter versus others? Is it intuitive, or is there a learning curve for the actual procedure to occur with our catheter?
Yeah, so this procedure, it's done by interventional radiologists. And, the centers that we're talking about that, treat the lion's share of this disease all have interventional radiologists. You just can't function treating pancreas cancer and a lot of the other cancers that I think that this catheter probably will be very useful for in the future. They all have robust interventional radiology teams and suites. So from a technical standpoint, it's actually pretty straightforward for them because they're just accessing major vessels that they do all the time for other procedures. Any device has, its own sort of specifics about how to use it that can be learned very quickly. What is nice is that the company offers support for that. So they have a team that reviews the imaging on your behalf, and they, will help support you in any way so that, the team is comfortable doing the procedure. But, obviously, anytime a new device comes out, we in the medical field always worry about safety, right? So if you were trying to reinvent the wheel with how this catheter worked, then I think people would be much more careful or conservative about adopting it. But it's essentially doing a procedure that's done many times for different reasons, except now there's some balloons there and they infuse, they infuse the chemotherapy. But by and large, it's very similar to procedures that are done very commonly by these practitioners.
Thank you. I appreciate
And
that.
Dr. Tiesi, to expand on that, this is we can share this, that from a proctoring standpoint, a lot of new medical technologies, as you all know, you need like a rep or a proctor in the room for almost every procedure. So what we've seen, the learning curve is pretty quick on this, where after a handful of like 2 or 3 procedures, the physicians are comfortable to do this on their own. And in fact, at Dr. Tiesi's facility, they're doing procedures without us being there after doing the first handful. So it doesn't require a large field force to be able to cover and launch the technology.
That's great color, Shaun. Really appreciate it. And we're at just about time for our chat. Shaun, one of my favorite questions: why do you think that the stock is undervalued, and why?
Global market aside, what's been interesting, I believe there's been really a lack of understanding of the commercial opportunity that sits right in front of us. And being in the microcap space through tumultuous times in the biotech and medical device space, and transitioning over the last couple of years, now that we're transitioning to this commercial opportunity, I really start with the idea of the last fundraising round we did. It was the first time in the history of the company we did a non-warrant, straight common deal within high-quality institutions. I'm very much looking forward to the 13F filers that's come out here in a couple of weeks, so the public can see the quality of investors that's come into the stock. I believe that in combination with seeing our commercial growth and opportunity here and the finance overhang being gone, we're fully capitalized to penetrate and achieve our operations missions. I think once those things start to come out, people will start to realize the opportunity here. I like to point to a couple of companies as comparators, or a few. TriSalus, Delcath, and RenovoCure are playing in the cancer space, and that gives you a spectrum from a catheter-based company, TriSalus, that's got a commercial device. I think it was about $30 million of revenue last year without a lot of data, and in a crowded liver space. They've also got some phase 1 opportunities they're looking into. So similar to us in terms of a commercial opportunity and a clinical opportunity. Delcath is a drug device combination in the liver space in a niche market. It's something to look forward to, that once we get the trial done and we do launch a drug device combination, there's potential revenues there. And RenovoCure is a standalone device company that's been around in the cancer space as well, in niche orphan products. Their market caps range between about 150 million. TriSalus, I think, Delcath is close to $500 million, and then RenovoCure in the billions. I believe that we're similar to all 3 of these companies in different ways. They're different shots on goal. We're just a couple years behind them. So I believe as the market starts to see the opportunity, as we start to get more advancements on how this can add up in terms of revenue with multiple treatments per patient, strong reimbursement in place, and high physician demand, the stock will start to wake up and see the opportunity here.
Well said. Thanks, Shaun. And Dr. Tiesi, really appreciate your time today. This does conclude our fireside chat. There were some questions that we didn't get a chance to get to. Please email our team at RenovoRx@KCSA.com. We had a full call today. I really appreciate everybody participating. Shaun, any final words before we conclude?
No, thank everyone for the time. I know it's a crazy time in the market today, and I'm happy to be able to share how we're transitioning the company into this commercial opportunity and really getting this therapy out to patients. It's been a long road to have this success, and it's great to have partners like Dr. Tiesi see the opportunity here to treat their patients as well. I appreciate everyone's help on this, and thank you for joining.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.